No, this is like Saturn went retrograde 2 days ago, man. Just completely thrown me off. Oh, but last time that we had the reading thing, I talked about developing the Octina. Remember, like a sestina, only with 8 words. And I haven't gotten the form down yet, but I had done 2 stanzas. Were you here last time? I had done 2 stanzas, but for it to be an octina, I figured it should be 64. Not stanzas, 64 lines. That's why I wanted to go first, because it's going to be 9 o'clock by the time we get to the 64 stanzas. This one is, it's called Octina on Eros. So it's 8 words that repeat in different orders, you know, each of the 8 words at the end of one of the 8 lines never repeating. And I know there's a geometrical figure that I can get it where it does a nice, smooth, rhythmic thing. Haven't done that yet. I'm still working on developing it. But this is the first one, and they're kind of like story poems. Octina on Eros. It was a cold, cold night in Spain when Eros crept into the bed of the fool, and romping through a needy dream spilled his seed, from which grew a magnificent red rose with one giant thorn. The awakened dreamer presented his flower as a gift to the dark-eyed maiden who dwelt in the swamp. Her father was a professor of ancient mysteries, specializing in the void, whose airy intellect was unfortunately complemented by a licentious libido that the maiden preferred to avoid. So she fled from her creepy father professor and took refuge with the swamp people, who were astonished to behold the gift with its voluptuous blossom and sharp curved thorn. Entranced, they made cuttings, harvested the seed, and spread the species throughout their boggy abode. The fool they crowned as their mock king, with the dark-eyed maiden as queen, thus realizing the intentions of Eros in an earthly garden of delight. Meanwhile, in Cordova, the king of Spain was wondering what had happened to his fool. He lacked for laughter, and this became a thorn in his side. In the past, absurdity had lightened his load. Now there was a void into which the king descended. His life became a dreary swamp of bad dreams and bad days, pierced by arrows of disappointment and uncertainty. And so the king promised a royal gift to whoever could find his missing minion. This promised reward nurtured an evil seed in the mind of the lusty professor, for he had conceived an affection for the king's lovely daughter. And so the professor, locked high in his stone tower, oblivious to the disappearance of his own blood seed, consulted his arcane manuscripts, intending to use magic to win the royal gift. Nightly he chanted, drank potions, conjured demons, and prayed to Eros that he might have a vision. And indeed his prayer was answered, for in a dream he saw this in the swamp his daughter sitting atop the missing jester's codpiece. No paternal feelings stirred. He thought only of how to use her to quench his desire. A void existed between his head and his groin. He had no guts and no heart. Deadened to the thorn of decadence, he thought himself wise when he was, in fact, a fool. The people of the bog had continued to proliferate the seed of the glorious rose throughout the swamp. From the hips they made healing medicine, from the flower garlands and rosewater, and from the thick sturdy stalk and razor-sharp barb swift arrows that always met their mark. A new faith had blossomed, in which they conceived their new king as the sharp tip of their arrow, and their queen as the fertile red flower. The professor knew nothing of this. He thought only of the fool and how he could lure him back to the palace. Like a thorn, his desire carved into his brain a plan. He wrote a letter to his daughter, repenting of past lechery, congratulating her newfound love, and promising her a wedding gift if she would return to visit him with her husband. In fact, he attempted to give her no gift, but only to seize the groom. For in his mind all contracts were void, except for that which he hoped to claim fulfillment of from the king. And so the thorn of the marshland people, that is to say, the fool, set off with his rosy, dark-eyed queen, now pregnant, accompanied by archers, to meet the professor. The secret that no one knew was that this remarkable man was in fact the child of Eros, conceived in the womb of the nymph of the river that flowed through the kingdom and fed the swamp. Nor did anyone imagine that the seed from which the maiden had sprouted was not the wizard's, but that of a visiting French knight, whose thorn had pierced the hymen of the old man's bride, guided by the power of Eros, the very day that the knight had won the joust with his sturdy lance, and the very night of the professor's wedding, after the depraved codger had passed out drunk on the banquet floor. Thus the seed in the womb of the couple that approached the city was both divine and royal. Out of the void, a new Messiah was soon to be born. No one jests with a fool and wins, for the gods had seen fit to bring forth a gift that would unite the realms of field, forest, and swamp. When the king heard that an army of archers was marching out of the swamp, he hastened to assemble his knights and sally forth. But it was no foe, but a gift he found. For as he approached the oncoming force, he recognized the fool from a distance, and his heart leapt. Just then, out of the void between the nymph and of the river, out of the void between them, the nymph of the river appeared and revealed to the king the seed from which the treasured companion's life had sprung. The professor was quite taken aback, but still tried to claim the king's daughter as his reward. But Eros had other plans. A messenger arrived. The knight, now king of France, acknowledged the girl as his own only child. The daughter revealed to the king the wizard's perfidy. The professor sought to use his dark arts to conjure up an army of demons, but an archer from the bog pierced his heart with a thorn. There was much merriment in the castle that night. I think it's interesting the way you just pick 8 words, you don't have any intention of what's going to come out, and then your unconscious kind of, you put the words at the end of the line in the beginning to have the order, right? And then you just fill in the lines as they go along, and then something comes out and takes shape, kind of like a dream, or a fairy tale.